Welcome to my YouTube channel. 4 years ago, I made a video introducing myself, especially at that moment to Luxembourgish interested people, because actually there are rarely any Luxembourgish videos concerning stuff like NLP on one side, tarot on the other side, coaching on one side, and esotericism, spirituality on the other side. So now when I created a new video to reintroduce me in a certain way after 4 years, because there was a lot of evolution concerning my path, my way and my offers, that I wanted to introduce myself again. There is one thing I absolutely noticed, which is the translation that you see, the subtitles that you see concerning from Luxembourgish to another language is not really too correct. So what I try to do now is to make an introduction video in the different languages, which means that there will be one in English, as I am just starting to do, one in French, one in German, and there are 2 or 3 things that I just want to be clear about. First of all, my first language is Luxembourgish, so whatever other language I use, it's not my maternal language. Second point, as I each time make a new video, there may be slight differences, not in the line about what I'm talking, but maybe an example that I show or an idea I come up with. This is not in a selective way, but just that if I have explained something in French very often, it may be that my mind just comes up with it more quickly. You see what I am talking about in that language, and so I will maybe bring in something in French that I do not bring in German, and I may bring up something in English that I forget to talk about in German, as an example. So the point is that when I started introducing myself 4 years ago, one of the things that was quite difficult for me is people like to have a category. Where do I put myself in all those options that there are? And there are 2 things in it. First of all, I don't think there is one single drawer for anybody and that anybody can just fill a complete drawer. What I mean is that whatever you do, if you work with tarot, for example, you will have your individual thing in it that you will not really fit that drawer, and maybe there's something that you are not using concerning tarot, and somebody who is looking for someone who uses tarot will say, oh, that person doesn't have that, so actually it doesn't fit into my idea of category concerning tarot. On the other side, there is that part that unfortunately giving yourself a certain identity, a title, a denomination, risks that there is an identification with it, and first of all, people will just see you as that and not as one person doing all this. So let me quote the late Sam Neill for this, because he said, I am not an actor, I am somebody who is acting, and this is exactly how I see it. So actually, if there is any denomination concerning me, it's just my name. I am Mats, and for the rest I will come up at the end with a kind of denomination, but just don't put me into that drawer alone. And I am someone who is working with tarot, who is an author, who is using NLP, who has a certificate concerning Zhugong Ming Li, and what I'm trying to do here is to just propose to you to take a look at a lot of things that I can do, a lot of things I am working with, ideas, the way I am functioning, so as a human being, how I think as a human being. I don't want to put this into an idea like a belief or a religion, so just to get this one straight also, and to make a little tour around so that you may have a better understanding for the videos that will follow, as well as for the offers that I make. Where should I begin? So one of the first things is that in the beginning, 4 years ago, as I said, I was going into directions like an alternate witch, an alternative using, well, working witch, and also for coaching I was using that term alternative, and I'm just trying to move away from that. Am I using witchcraft? Yes, there are witchy things I do. Let me just put it like that. Let's stick with the idea. I'm not an actor, I am someone who is acting. Am I coaching? Yes, coaching is a tool I use, but I use the tool in coaching. It's like a Swiss knife. And am I using tarot? Yes, but you will most definitely, if you haven't seen my videos already before, you will most definitely get an idea that I use tarot slightly in a different way than other people do. Or, interesting enough, today people start going into that direction, which is, by the way, something I rather see in the direction of English-speaking people going far deeper with tarot than other countries or other speaking people. So that is something I use for languages, so I get a little bit insight into different directions, into different countries, and there are things like that that I think are very interesting, which also had an effect on something, but let me come to that one a little bit later. So let's start with the point of cards. So as I said, I am using tarot, and most of the time the first pointer is I am not using tarot for future readings. I am not using tarot to tell anyone about what is another person thinking. Okay, this is not going to happen. The cards for me is always on a subject going on and on the person itself. So if there is something concerning a meeting another person and you have your doubts on that person, or you are just curious about that person, the cards will not tell you anything about the person, but about your part paying attention to what concerning the person. But I will never give people the opportunity to project their own thoughts onto a person they may not know as well as they believe they know the person. So also when I'm using tarot, I have a lot of decks. When people come to me, very often, sometimes I just use a deck like this intuitively, but I also, especially when I use tarot for in a therapeutical way, and then I let people choose a deck, because the cards should talk to the person, because the images of the card, the imagery of tarot, for me at first place is like a dictionary between your subconscious and your consciousness, and so this gives you the opportunity to communicate. And what I'm doing at that moment is, first of all, give you the opportunity to show and to talk about the impact a card has on you before reframing you with the meaning of a card into the concept of what is going on. One of the decks, I'm going to show you just 3 decks because I have so many. One of the decks, which was the first one that I understood, the first one I could really read very quickly, was the Druidcraft Tarot. Still, even today, it is one of the, I would say, most famous when we get away from typical cards like Rider-Waite or Marseille. There is a reason why I do not work with Rider-Waite. The reason is very simple. Because if you take a look at the cards in Rider-Waite, and as I use the cards as communication tool for a person, it is very difficult to communicate with a person who is, well, making faces, like sort of being in a bad mood. And take a look at the cards of the Rider-Waite. I think in the whole deck there are 3 cards where the person is not showing a bad mood. So this is difficult as a deck to work with it. Fortunately, today we have a lot of decks where people have different ways of looking at having different expressions on their faces, and that makes it easier to find a deck that really fits for the person to work with a deck. 2 other decks, which are more the normal decks, let's see it like that. One is the Gilded Royale by Ciro Marchetti. I am an absolute Marchetti fan. So let me show you also here some cards, just to give you an idea. And Lulin had in the first Lulin deck there was very close to the Arthurian legend. I am concerning using the Arthurian legend in coaching is for me something that's a perfect tool, but the decks not always spoke to the person. So they Lulin had another classical deck which is close to the Rider-Waite, but with the images, let's say, revisited. And for me it is a beautiful one to work with in a quite neutral way. But I have a lot of decks. I have fun decks, I have a ghost deck, stuff like that. And even if people believe in the beginning, while that's not very serious, just to bring in that fun, it helps people to open up and not to be deadly serious. Somebody once said that fun is something that can never be taken seriously enough, and that is actually the way I see it. So I'll give you a certain insight into cards. There are a lot of decks. You just have to Google it if you like and take a look at it. I'm definitely not going through all my decks because that will take days to show them all. Another question that sometimes comes up is if I'm using cards, if I'm also using cards like Lenormand or oracles. If a person has been here for quite some time and knows my way to work, and they have like a subject, then it can happen that I use the Lenormand just to get a complete image. I am not reading all the cards, I am just picking up the situation in a certain way. So where is the person in the situation concerning the whole deck, concerning the whole spread? The subject, what is in the subject, what are the cards around the subject, what are the cards around the person, to have an insight. And from that insight on, I go on working with tarot, for example. Or if it is a subject that comes up, I can use a tool in coaching to bring the person to the solution needed. When I'm talking about tools, I am working a lot with NLP. And I am absolutely aware, something that is not needed to be said in every country, but I'm absolutely aware that a lot of people learn and teach NLP to sell you a car, for example. But here I'm talking really to use the tools as my teacher in NLP said. He was a psychologist, and he always says, psychology gave me a lot of knowledge, a lot of theory, but NLP gave me the tools to use this theory. So this was my teaching with Markus Hünting, a German NLP teacher, and for me it explained exactly how to use NLP in a quite healthy way. So one of the only decks I'm really using, I have several ones, but my favorite concerning Lenormand is a German one, because first of all, there is far more on the card, so you can also bring up like a story behind the card. You can link that story with the situation of the person, and also something that is very important for me, there are always animals on the cards, and I like to use the idea of power animal lessons. So don't get me wrong, I am not going into the typical shamanic way because I am not a shaman. So for me it is clear I am using shamanistic tools, but always in the due respect to know that I do not have that title, and it's not because I went to a weekend seminar that I come up and I am a shaman. So I am really trying to keep that respect concerning cultures, concerning tools that have been used in cultures for years and for years and for decades, that I cannot simply say I am that and give me a title. I am not entitled to a title concerning a situation I have not been raised into and also been not born into, but been have grown into, let's say, because someone who becomes or gets the title of a shaman, for me personally, correct me if I'm wrong, for those who really are into the in shamanism and who really are shamans, for me it is something that has a lot to do with the evolution, with the development, with the teaching also concerning life situation, to be absolutely straight and really set into how can I use those techniques, and what have I been taught. And concerning that, I have not been taught enough to have any right to such a title, and this is something I fully respect. Something else I am using is runes. I have been working with runes, I have been in touch with runes since I am 14, and for me there is something very interesting. So I always say tarot is a lot to guide our mind. Oracles, a lot of oracles have to do with our hearts. If I have oracles with beautiful images that bring me into a good frame, a good mindset, even if it is a heart set in a certain way, then it has a lot to do how is my heart reacting to the card. Runes for me are gut feeling. So if I use a rune, or if someone says what rune can I use for that, the answer that comes is, that's not simply intuition, that's pure instinct, and that is absolute gut feeling. And for me to bring in those three centers, mind, heart and gut, is something that is very important. I will bring up that subject slightly in a different moment and position of my video. So for me, I have rune stones, but I also have something else I am very proud of, and that I would like to present to you if you have not yet seen my videos. It's a rune board. The first time I have seen it, someone made only 2 lines, but I think that 3 ads fit perfectly, and so this way you can use it either with black and white stones, sort of what is important, what is not important, or you can use it, for example, in connection with the chakras, and you use stones in the different colors of the chakra, and you will see what connection there is between a rune and a certain chakra. There are so many possibilities, so many options. You could even throw runes, cast runes onto the rune board, but that's not where I'm heading for. Now, 4 years later, concerning my first introduction, something else has changed a lot. And it has a lot to do with the fact that I took several courses. I am still falling down the rabbit hole, and I still feel like Alice in Wonderland the moment I touched Taoism. And I'm not talking about Taoism the way people are talking about Taoism here. First of all, in the imported version of Taoism, I always get that reaction. Are you talking about religious Taoism, or are you talking about philosophical Taoism? This distinction does not exist, because Taoism, as it has been used far beyond, so before the Chinese Revolution, was a mixture of those two. So they do not split it, which means that if you only use the philosophical part, to put it like that, it means that you are in the mental world with it, with the way you think about life. But if you also use what we call the religious part, they do not call it like that. We come also to the rituals, and they consider it to be one part is the yin part, the other one is the yang part. So rituals and actions into that direction are important to get your body into motion, to get the energy into motion, instead of just staying in the yin mind concerning that part and just let things happen around. So in real Taoism, you have the absolute right to act, and it's not all those mistaken ways to see something like Wei Wu Wei. I know here we only say Wu Wei, but actually it's Wei Wu Wei. So it's action, stopping, letting happen, and action again. So it's this movement, and I like this movement. I also use it a lot concerning the 5 elements, the Wuxing for me is has another logic. I don't want to say it's more logical than the 4 elements we have here. And no, I'm not talking about 5 elements in our directions, because it's 4 directions. It's everything that has to do with 4. The fifth element, being ether, is something that is New Age esotericism, and I just keep it out for a second, because for me there is a difference. The moment I go into the 5, I'm going into movement, I'm going into interaction. And one of the things that I have learned is what is called Zhugong Mingli. Zhugong Mingli is Taoist numerology. What I like in it is that it's not a straight line, but it's based on what we call Saturn square, which is actually the Lo Shu, because it was Lo Shu who created it, who found out about it, who calculated. So yes, for those who are using the Saturn square, it's made in China. I also use that for casting runes, for example. But to give you an idea of what the Saturn square or the Lo Shu is, I put it here. So this is my board to cast runes on it, but I use it also for a tarot reading, because the interaction between the cards becomes far deeper on a level that is rarely seen in the work of tarot. Keeping up with tarot, so I am going to show something else too. I will start with the last one. Tarot is for me an important subject, because I don't simply use it just to make small readings, but I think that it is an absolute tool to show our inner dynamics. So I work a lot with things like inner family systems. So I'm not making family constellation with people. I don't consider it to be very ethical, but that's my point of view. It's not an opinion in itself, because I've made the experience of people having very bad experiences with it. Don't get me wrong, I don't put everyone in the same drawer. It's just something to be very careful about, and not just to take it in an easy way. It's something that can have or create serious problems. It's a completely different subject. I will come up with it again if you like. So as always, if you have questions, please note them, so I can make videos, I can explain things with concerning the questions you have. But I also use tarot, so and basing myself on the major arcana, and I started 13 years ago to take a different look at the cards. So first of all, there was a spread that I created using all the 22 major arcana, but using it and working with it, finding out that there are interactions between the cards, showed me 2 things. First of all, there is a deeper point of view, so you can start the point of view on a deeper level. I give you a simple example. Let's take a card like the Magician, and we talk about our will, about our tools, but nobody actually talks about who is this person who has that will. Is that really our will? Is it something that is just a mechanism, an automatism that we have? So I'm talking about the identity of that person who has the will. And that way, I get a completely different way of looking at myself when that card turns up in a reading for me, for example. So this was a kind of spread that developed along with a completely different, no, not a completely different, but a deeper understanding concerning the cards. So someone who is using the cards may have the possibility to take another look at what the card may tell a person through this. So after 13 years, I was actually planning to write a book about tarot and NLP, but this is the book that came up. This is a book about the reading, about the spread, about how to look at the cards again, with how to use the spread with other tools, and even how to use the minor arcana later on a level where you can first of all work with the energies, the aspects, the dynamics of a card, and to use the court cards as parts of ourself or basing on the transaction analysis. This is the last book I wrote, and so people can ask me to have a reading like that, but it's rather, don't get this wrong, this is a reading for let's say not a week, but you can use this reading and work with it for over 2 years without any problem. This also shows where my help goes. It goes a little bit away from coaching, because coaching in a certain way is giving someone a frame, and in that frame we are going to find out about the solutions there are. We are going to create solutions, we are going to invent solutions. Inventing is not a bad way to see it. What I found out over the time is that not every problem is linked to ourselves as it really is, but has to do with the way we'll see ourselves, what we know about ourselves, and because of that we consider a situation being a problem. And I would like to guide people to have a place, a frame where they can breathe for a moment, that they do not have to play a role, and that they become aware of who they have always been without having the opportunity to be that person. And the moment they find out more about themselves, they may not consider the situation as a problem anymore. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean every problem is not there anymore, but it takes you away from some problems, not concerning to find a solution to a problem, but to find out that it is not a problem anymore. And this book is one of the tools I am using for this. Another tool that I'm using is the Taoist numerology, Zhugong Ming Li, and the Bazi, because it shows our inner energies, and I take people away from two things. First of all, if we're talking about resources, because in coaching you have often hear the word resources. The problem we have with resources is that over years and over decades and over generations we have been taught that a resource is something that is ending. So we're talking about gas in our world, we're talking about the petrol in our world, and we all sort of know that it is not a never-ending resource. And even if I have spiritual people who say, oh, I know that I am connecting to the universe, and the universe is not and is endless, that's nice, that's very nice, but just check if your subconscious sees that too, because our subconscious is also linked to our body and still knows that it is ending somewhere. So instead of using the word resources, where there may be this idea of ending and not endless in it, I like to work with ideas like dynamics, talents, parts of personalities with their capacities, and so I am out of the way and I'm bringing the person to what the person really is and what is inside of the person, instead of what the person has. So you get the difference, and this changes a person's view on him or herself, and is therefore changing the view on the outside. As I'm saying, it's not solving every problem, but some things will not turn up to be considered to be a problem anymore later on. Are there any typical magical things that I propose? Yes, and again, let me get this. So this is, for the moment, it is in German. I am translating it right now and re-editing it concerning an English version. It is a book concerning sigils. Two things concerning this book. First of all, it is not a list of sigils, because you have a lot of sigil books where you have a lot of sigils and they tell you you can use that for that and you can use that for that. This is sigil work, which means it gives you the opportunity to make the different steps to find and to create the sigil that fits for you, which is your own creation at the end, that you can change into something that you carry around, that you put on a glass, for example, or that you create a picture with, and to change your words and your thoughts into a vibration concerning lines, because lines are very often linked with vibration, concerning with colors and so on. So instead of just proposing them and to say we are going to do, or I'm going to do a sigil for a certain subject, I am proposing this as a book, and with some luck, and if people are interested, it will become a course, a class that I am going to make, because I think it is quite some interesting stuff in there, especially in a way because the feedback I sometimes get is this is fun. And as I just said before, fun is something that has never been taken seriously enough. If you go there with fun, you have this joy, and joy is the best creational energy that you may have. So doing something like that is perfect for it. I just forgot one point, because before, somewhere in between, I talked about constellation. And I said that I'm not doing family constellation with people, but I use for constellations, I'm using figurines, and I'm making inner family constellations, because I think they work very fine in the way, as I explained with the book about tarot, that it gives you a possibility to shift inside and to become someone you have always been. Shifting does not mean move it somewhere where it didn't fit, but in a certain way moving it back where it has always belonged. And so that way you can work out what is happening inside and what shift you can do so it becomes natural again. This is something I can use cards for it, because I also have, let me check if I can show you. So the cards are not spread out, but in the moment I use them for constellation, I have those small holders so that the cards can really look at each other or turn their back on each other. So this is quite a good way to work with the cards. I also have logically normal figurines, but I also have a box full of animals. And a lot of people say, oh yes, this is cool for kids. And I say it's also cool for adults, because the fun that comes up and this game, this playfulness that comes up when people are using them is amazing, and it changes so much inside. And this is the last thing I will talk about before ending this video, because actually there is a very important thought in the stuff that I'm doing. When I'm teaching people things, the question about teaching and about kids, for example, this situation is very interesting, because here in our schools, for example, when we teach people, we are talking about, let me get it, because it's a word that I think is very difficult for me to say in English. It's pedagogy. And funny enough, so what is it telling us? It is telling us grown-ups show people how they should function. And if you believe that anything has changed, let us get to the point where the word comes from, because actually pedagogos was a Greek slave who taught kids how to become slaves. And if someone says yes, but the things have changed, no, the reason behind still hasn't changed. And a lot of people tell me, yes, instead of what would you change when you go to school, I would take that one out and I would bring in NLP, and especially the presuppositions of NLP. But actually I found out that there is something that is called andragogy, and andragogy is teaching for grown-ups, and I don't know why they're using it only for grown-ups, because it is creating a safe frame where a person can exercise a tool, a way to behave, so that later on in a safe place where it can get the teaching, the corrections without any danger, any consequences, and then go out and use it in the world. I think this is fitting also for kids, and this is exactly what this is about. So bringing it in, yes, also for kids. If someone thinks it may be helpful for a kid to come here and to try this with the animals, no problem at all. But a grown-up has the right to get back to this childlike, I'm not talking about childish, but about into that childlike, playful thing to learn how to be in a certain way, because nature is always teaching and is always learning by playing by a game. So let's pick that up again and playfully become ourselves, who we really are. This is what I am offering to people. This is how I think. This is a little bit how I work. You will have other videos. There are already videos. There will be other videos again on those different things that I am offering, on thoughts I have, and maybe, if you like, on questions that you have that I will use to create videos fit for you in the questions that come up. So far, I thank you very much for listening to me. Please leave a like, leave a note, follow my channel, be in contact. This way we can become this can become an interactive space for people to find out further about me, about my work, and maybe about themselves. Thank you.